I've been asked to moderate tonight's meeting. It's forum style. Before we get underway, though, we were hoping that our representative here, Councilman Capriolio, will, I was getting there, will have a few words to say to us and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hey, listen, everyone, this might be your first time in District 4. I want to welcome each and every one of you to District 4. You're right in the middle of it. It includes Fashion Fair, Fresno State, Airport. So it's a large district, and I really appreciate you guys being here. By the way, District 4 is the best district, and we have some openings if you want to move in. We have great services, pretty good representation, so really would appreciate you considering that. So if you'd all like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, if we could all stand. We'll face the flag under Hoover, Patriots, presented by the class of '84. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very, very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So tonight, you may have noticed it's a kind of an unusual seating style. It's called theater in the round, if you will. I don't know how much drama there's going to be, maybe some, but so we'll still call it theater in the round. And I have a very simple job tonight, which is to simply make sure that we stay on topic and that we get as much light and understanding out of this meeting as we possibly can. Hopefully you all had a chance to take advantage of the open house portion for the first hour. There were a number of knowledgeable people out there trying to do their best to answer your questions and hear what you had to say. We also have a panel of experts, if you will, who are seated in these two rows over here. We've got some questions that we'd like to put to them in order to have their expertise shared with us as well. But we're going to reserve plenty of time for all of you to make comments, ask questions. We have some pretty simple ground rules for tonight. The first one is everyone's perspective is valued. I assume that you must be pretty motivated people to be here. It's Monday Night Football. It's a beautiful evening outside. There are other things you could be doing, and you chose to share your time with us tonight. So that's a really good sign that you have a good reason for being here. And we don't expect everyone to agree. We don't expect everyone to have the same opinion. What's important is that we respect each other's opinions, and everyone has their perspective. I ask that you be concise. We don't have an abundance of time, and so the more people get a chance to participate, the better, and being concise helps us do that. And then finally, I ask you to exercise one of the most underutilized communication skills that there is. That's called listening. I ask that you listen to understand rather than listen to debate. Try and get out of this whatever you can. There are a lot of smart people in the room, all around the room, and the more we listen to understand, the more we'll know by the end of it. For those of you who remember Lily Tomlin, she once said, "Communication in the United States is a competitive sport in which the first person to draw a breath is declared the listener." All right? So we're going to try and listen a slightly different style tonight, if that's okay with you. And to get things started, we've got a presentation. We've asked them to keep it short and sweet, but we're going to try and lay the groundwork tonight in this first forum. And if you saw the flyers, you saw that there's a logic to these. The first one tonight is going to focus on what's the nature of the problem. I do a lot of facilitation of collaborative problem-solving processes. One of the things you find out very soon is that people can talk past each other and come up with completely different solutions, and you wonder why. And then you dig down and you find out it's because they have different definitions of the problem. So no wonder they don't agree on what the solution would be or can't even get close to it. So what we're hoping tonight is to set the stage for the other forums to come. The second forum is going to focus on, well, okay, maybe we have somewhat of a common understanding of the problem. What would we do about it? What should you do about it in the city of Fresno? And then after that forum, there'll be a third one where we're talking about, well, assuming there's any consensus or some sense of what makes sense to do to keep Fresno fresh and vital, if that's going to require an investment on the city and the ratepayers and the citizens' part, how that should be done. What's a fair way to do that? What's equitable? And so I imagine a lot of you are interested in all of those questions. A lot of you may be interested in more of the latter ones than the former ones. So we're going to ask your forbearance to honor the way this has been laid out and recognize that tonight we're going to focus on what is the nature of the problem. And to kick us off, Brock Buki, where are you? Somewhere? Right there in front. Like I said, it's going to give a short presentation, but it starts with a video. All right, you ready for the video?
My phone. Definitely.
Family.
My chapstick.
The relationships that I have.
Going to church.
Internet.
My cell phone. Most likely.
I'd say my family.
My bike.
Money.
My house.
My wife.
That's huge. I don't even think I know how to live without water.
Tough question. I can't answer it.
You can't live without water, right?
I couldn't live without that either.
That'd be really hard to live without, definitely.
Couldn't live.
I'd be very upset. Without water, you can live. Probably freak out.
I would die. I'd be furious. I mean, it's the source of living.
You can't survive without water.
You do everything with water.
Really improve our dam situation and be able to preserve the water that we have.
Regulations, to have some type of regulations, not just making the regulations, but also enforcing them.
If water is scarce and the price is higher, that's going to force people to conserve.
Like desalinization using ocean water.
Here we drill for water right now, but we can't exactly keep pumping for water forever, can we?
I think we need better water resources. Something to hold the water when we do get the water stuff, we just don't let it go.
Recycling water as much as possible.
Not how to attain more water, but really be constructive with what we do with the existing water.
As Lewis pointed out, my name is Brock Buki. I work for the City of Fresno Water Division. I'm the chief engineer there, and I've been working there for 19 years. For the last 10 years, I've been involved with various water resource management plans within the city, and then also with regional opportunities with other agencies and folks looking at dealing with water supply issues in our region. So the fundamental thing that we're all here about is water, and what is the source of that? You know, we're fortunate to be located where we are. We have a river to the north and also to the south with the San Joaquin and the Kings Rivers. With the snow, it collects in the Sierras and it stays there for quite some time. We're able to capture that water not only in the early part of the season, but as it melts off into the summer, it replenishes the reservoirs, and we can continue relying on that supply for a longer term. And then we also have rainfall. You know, that's that immediate delivery of water. It soaks the ground. It also collects behind reservoirs, but it replenishes the groundwater, you know, when it collects on ag lands. And in the city, we have, you know, various flood control basins, which we can capture it there too and replenish the groundwater that way. Leah. So kind of one of the fundamental things here is, you know, the city of Fresno has looked at water supply for a very long time. Typically, you know, we've had an abundant and very resourceful aquifer to deal with. Typically, for the last 130 years, as the city has grown, we've been able to go out and drill a new well, and we've been able to meet demands in that way. But two, we had a real awakening. We had relied heavily on that groundwater resource and had just become accustomed to it always being there for us. But in the late 80s, you know, there was widespread groundwater contamination that was discovered. We had the agricultural pesticide, DBCP, then we had industrial contaminants, TCE, and all of these plumes really had an impact on our ability to provide water to the city. And so at the same time too, we acquired a lot of county islands, and these systems were impacted by the same contaminants, and we really struggled to meet pressures within the city, and that water supply was really impacted. And so tonight we don't want to forget that. The city has been through different and difficult situations before, and so we just kind of want to reflect on that as we're moving forward. So over the last 80 years, the groundwater levels have dropped 80 feet. That's substantial. We've had some groundwater modeling that has been done recently with the preparation of various plans, and we're seeing that the groundwater will decline at about 1.5 feet every year. So right now, it's not a sustainable use of that supply. And although we've made efforts to do recharge, we have our Leaky Acres facility. It's just east of the 168 at Ashland, and we have the recharge basins with the flood control. We still have not been able to offset the groundwater pumping that the city has been doing. So Fresno is not the only one that's having this problem. When you look at this DWR publication, they are looking at what is happening with groundwater levels within the San Joaquin Valley. You can see that, most of this, and I know it's hard for folks to see this at this distance, but in the bottom left corner, the legend is blown up, and the green represents areas where wells have increased in elevation by 0 to 25 feet. The yellow, very tall bar represents wells that have seen groundwater levels decline 0 to 25 feet. And then orange is the 25 to 50, and the red is over 50.
In Brock, I'm not sure they can see it. That's over a 2-year time period, correct?
That's correct. So that's from 2011 to 2013, so 3-year period. So the point of this is to show that Fresno, like many other communities in the state, are dealing with a similar situation. So out of all this groundwater contamination, the declining groundwater levels, these challenges that were presented to the city, it very apparent became the need to kind of develop some kind of strategy to deal with this. And so in 1992, an effort was undertaken to develop a plan so that we could not only meet our immediate needs, but those going out into the future. And part of this effort was, it was very detailed. There was a technical advisory committee made up of members from different agencies, the county, FID, the flood control, and others. And we're really trying to evaluate what is the best long-term solution for meeting water demands here. And some of the things that were looked at, we're looking at just relying solely on groundwater, looking at just solely on surface water, or kind of a combination of the two, and coming up with a blend so that we can optimize the resources that we have available. And that's what we've kind of done. Along with that, the intentional recharge and expanding efforts on conservation. That plan was completed and adopted by City Council in 1996 and laid the groundwork for what we've been doing for probably the last 15 years. So some of the accomplishments that came out of that plan was the construction of our first surface water treatment plant. It's up at Beeheimer and Chestnut, and it produces 30 million gallons a day. So when our average demand is 200 million gallons a day, it starts making a small shift in what we're doing as far as our water supply strategies. Another component of the plan was conduct aggressive groundwater remediation. That's where we went after the manufacturers of the various contaminants and were able to get monies to build the wellhead treatment system so that we could continue to use the groundwater as a viable resource. And then two, we expanded our efforts on intentional recharge to offset the groundwater pumping. So despite all those wonderful things that we have done, we still only have 12% of our demands are met by utilization of surface water. 90% is still from groundwater, and that's produced by 260 wells. It's a lot of wells, and we're still needing to do that shift to utilization of surface water, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And then, we've also been able to reduce demands with the implementation of residential meters, which has been a very positive thing for us. So I mentioned earlier we had some plumes that we were dealing with the late 1980s. We still have those. There's a lot of legacy plumes, but this map represents more work that has been done since that earlier plan was done. We have in the southern part of the city, there's a yellow kind of area that represents nitrates that are at kind of half of the concern level for delivery. And the pink, it starts elevating and becomes a concern, and we have to deal with that as we're pumping water to the customers. And so we have to be sensitive to that. There's other contaminant plumes. There's kind of a dog leg one that runs, I'm gonna have to walk over here, down through here, which is the newest contaminant that we're dealing with is TCP. It's very difficult to treat, and it is a real threat to our ability to provide water in the future. So it's good to acknowledge that we've had these problems in the past. We still have problems in the future, and we need to recognize as we're moving forward.
So Brock was just asked a question, where's the TCP coming from? We're never going to get, unfortunately, a chance to get to everything we're going to get to tonight. So why don't we just take that one, answer it real quickly, but see if we can hold questions until, I think you've only got like 2 or 3 more slides and we'll be done. So real quickly, Brock, what's the source of TCP?
There's a correlation of the TCP plume to the DBCP. It was actually a waste product that was incorporated in DBCP, and so there's a correlation there. It's also part of some industrial type of operations, but right now the strongest link to the source is the historic DBCP plumes.
And where did they come from?
The DBCP plumes came from application to ag lands for the vineyards and orchards. It was used to control nematodes and percolated into the groundwater and is the source of that contamination.
Right. Can we go to the next slide? So I'm going to ask him to get through these. You know what, if it's a question about contamination, we didn't really come prepared with experts to talk about that. Maybe you could talk to them afterwards. We're trying to get to what's going on with the water supply. So is it okay? Sure.
So I mentioned earlier that we've been expanding a recharge, but that's just not enough for what we need to do. We need more aggressive projects. We're dealing with a declining groundwater table, and this table here tabulates kind of the typical water supply scenario that we've seen for the last 9 years. Our water demand has been 153,000 acre feet on average. Our treated water supply is typically about 19,000 acre feet. You subtract that from our demand, and our groundwater pumping is 134,000 acre feet. Of the groundwater pumping, intentional recharge accounts for 46,000 acre feet. And then we have natural recharge from rainfall and inflows from the rivers and other sources, and that's another 48,000 acre feet. So our deficit pumping is we're drawing out 40,000 acre feet more than we're putting back into the system, and that's just not sustainable. So we have enhanced recharge, but it's not enough, and we're really looking for other solutions. So the future with groundwater reliance, we've relied on groundwater for over a century, and as that groundwater declines, it becomes more and more expensive to lift it to the surface. Back the earlier chart, it showed groundwater levels were 30 feet in the 40s. After the end of World War II, the city really took off growing, and the groundwater levels have been declining ever since. And right now, we're at 130 feet below surface, and it just takes more energy to lift that water to the surface. And then two, as the groundwater levels drop, we get into water quality issues. Some of the deeper waters are impacted by elevated concentrations of iron and manganese, and so we have to start building treatment systems to deal with that. So there's an inherent benefit to keeping water levels elevated so that we can stay out of these impacted deeper waters. And then one of the biggest things, along with all of that, is we lose existing wells. A lot of our infrastructure is expected to live 60 to 80 years, and so we have wells that old. And when we drilled those wells, they might have been 150, 200 feet deep. So as those groundwater levels continue to decline, those wells are going to not be able to be used any longer because the water just isn't going to be in there where the pumps can get to it. And so we lose those assets a little bit before we should have. Again, if we can get that groundwater level to recover, we can optimize the extended life of those wells. And then availability is limited. There's only so much water we have in our portfolio, and we need to optimize the use of all of it. There's a lot, we're looking at the state map. We're looking at groundwater levels declining throughout the entire Central Valley and the state. The state is looking at developing legislation that's going to control how much water everybody that has a well can pump. And there has to be a sustainability, long-term sustainability is what they're looking for. And we can be ahead of that by demonstrating to the state that we have the capability to reverse an existing trend and hopefully, maintain control of that without state intervention. So that's an important thing to keep in our minds. And then basically, we just can't, meet today's demands. And so as the projections for demands increase, we need to be thinking ahead. So this graphic is great in showing some of the opportunities that we really have available to us. We've got the San Joaquin River that we have 60,000 acre feet of water available to us from the Bureau of Reclamation. Then we have Pine Flat, the Kings River, which through an agreement with the Fresno Irrigation District on a normal year, we'd have access to 120,000 acre feet. We have a huge available supply to us. We just don't have the infrastructure in place to take advantage of that. And so, as we're planning and looking at the long term and trying to offset things now, it only makes sense to take advantage of these supplies which we've been paying for and to start incorporating them into our portfolio and take them to the full advantage that benefits the entire city and the region, really. So this goes through the surface water allocations between the Bureau contract and our agreement with the Fresno Irrigation District. We typically have about 180,000 acre feet of water available to us on a normal year. This year and the last couple have not been normal because we had 0% allocations on CVP, but on a normal year we would have 180,000 available to us. The next line here represents, how much water we're presently treating at our northeast surface treatment plant, and that's 20,000 acre feet. And intentional recharge, we're able to do through leaky acres in the flood control basins on the average about 50,000 acre feet. So what that leaves us is in a normal year of 110,000 acre feet of unutilized surface water that we could take advantage of, treat, and start offsetting the groundwater declines that we've seen. So, but it's important that we understand that's available to us. So addressing the long-term water situation, you know, we really want a water system that has reliability, that, you know, despite wet winters or sustained droughts, that we have the reliability and we need the infrastructure to do that. And that also applies to replacing old mains that are reaching the end of their lives. We need to keep on top of the replacement programs so we have that reliability for our customers. Sustainability and resiliency, you know, it's taken advantage of all the resources that I've mentioned here so far, of the surface water supplies, and keeping groundwater as a viable resource moving forward. We absolutely need both of these to work hand in hand to meet not only today's needs, but those going out in the future. But right now, we just need to focus on fixing the problem that we have. Economic vitality. You know, this is a huge thing. We're talking about all the communities in the valleys that are struggling with water supply. We have a great source of surface water that's being unutilized right now to its fullest capacity. If we optimize and build the facilities to capture that, you know, we can really start attracting large businesses to the area and increasing, you know, the vitality of the city. So that's a key thing too. Ultimately, it comes down to providing customers safe, reliable water. We want clean water. The customers expect it. That's our job. So, you know, we're looking at every resource we can to ensure that the customers get the best that we can provide. And affordability, you know, that's huge. We're just not, we have to recognize the complex situation we're going in, evaluate all the alternatives, and find the one that best suits the needs for our customers and our community. So affordability is a huge aspect of what we're trying to do. So that summarizes really my presentation, and I'll hand it over to Lewis.
All right, thanks, Brock. That took a little bit longer than we thought. So panel, one person applauded for you, Brock. I hope you didn't miss that. Oh wait, more. Okay. All right. So I'm sure he appreciates you starting that. It only cost him like $5. Yeah. So I'm going to keep it short with the panel because I'm going to keep it short with the panel because I know there's a lot of people out there who will have something to say. But can I just ask any of you, what do you find unique or very typical? I mean, is this something that you find all over the valley, or is there something peculiar or particular to the situation in Fresno from your experience? And by the way, they're listed on your program, so I don't want to take the time for introductions, except for Laura Whitehouse, who didn't make it on the list. You might want to wave at them. They probably know you're the woman, so since it's a bunch of other guys up here. And for those of you who don't know, she was chair of the Utilities Advisory Committee for several years. So what's unique from your perspective? Anything, or is this same old what we see all over California, all over the Central Valley? Anybody want to take that? I'm going to ask our USGS.
All right. Hello, I'm John Tron with USGS, and I guess the question is what's going on in Fresno typical in this, I guess, the Central Valley and throughout California? What I would say is definitely in the Tulare Basin, which is defined as everything from the San Joaquin River down to Bakersfield. This is actually a pretty typical situation. A lot of the other cities and areas are experiencing overdraft, of a few feet per year. I would say that Fresno is interesting because they're on 100% surface water, which at least historically have been. A lot of the other areas do have the ability to use surface water when it's available. But one thing that's really in common in all these areas is that they have a lot of agriculture around them, and that agriculture is also pumping a lot of groundwater, and both the city pumping plus the agricultural pumping, together is really, I know that's one thing you didn't touch on in your presentation too much, is that it's not necessarily just the city, but also the ag in the area that are also pumping. And I'll just throw out some facts. So if, I mentioned the Tulare Basin, a lot of overdraft. There are basically, if you look at the whole Tulare Basin as a whole, it's declining 1.5 million acre feet a year. So I think you saw the slide for Fresno said it was about 40,000 acre feet. But 1.5 million, Pine Flat holds just over 1 million. So essentially every year an entire Pine Flat reservoir under the ground is being depleted. So that just gives you kind of in perspective.
Anything anybody wants to add? Okay, Gary Serrato.
I'm Gary Serrato. I'm the general manager of the Fresno Irrigation District. Been with them for almost 30 years now. Hate to think about that, but it's almost been 30 years. You can tell my forehead's getting a lot bigger. Okay. This water situation is a difficult situation. What's unique about Fresno and the Fresno Irrigation District is that the City of Fresno and FID work together to try to sustain a groundwater supply. The City of Fresno has a 60,000 acre foot contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, FID, and that's classified as Class 1. FID has a 75,000 acre foot contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, and we also have a great water supply from the Kings River. The water that's being supplied for the City of Fresno is under a contract that was negotiated by FID way back in the 70s. And in fact, the last time it was updated was in 1976. It's called the Conveyance Agreement, and you can find that on their website, the City of Fresno's website. What that does, it gives them a contractual right to receive water from the Fresno Irrigation District. And really it depends on the hydrological year in terms of how much water they get every single year. Obviously this year was a dry year. It followed two dry years, and now we're in a third consecutive dry year, which is the most critical of the three. And because of that, you're not going to see the water supply that we've gotten in the past. You heard Brock refer to as 0% allocation from Friant. For the first time ever, Friant got a 0% allocation. And so those types of things affect our water supply. The San Joaquin River Restoration Program was another program that affected our water supply. Anytime you do restoration, you're going to have to give up both water supply and dollars to make that happen, okay? But giving up the water supply, it's been estimated that the Class 1 contractors are going to lose at the average annual of 8%. The Class 2 contractors, that was predicted that was going to be somewhere around 14%, and quite honestly, I think they missed that by a whole bunch, okay? But of course, we're going through some dry years. Hopefully we will get into some wet years here relatively soon. But the point is that we need to do a better job of capturing that water supply when it's available to us. And I think that's the point of what we're talking about today. Now, in terms of water supply that the City of Fresno pays for, we have a little different perspective of FID. It doesn't go down the river, and we don't lose it to the area. We actually are able to capture that water and deliver it to our growers. Delivering water to our growers is the cheapest way of groundwater recharge, and it's also referred to as in lieu recharge. So the water stays in the region, it stays in the area, and when you look at and Brock referred to the Kona Depression, in other words, this hole that's being developed because the city continues to draw water from the underground, and we're talking about putting it back in, and that's a wise thing to do. We need to get water back into the underground. But when you're delivering that water to growers that are adjacent to the cities, what you're finding is that Kona Depression isn't so much getting deeper, it's getting wider. And when it becomes wider, then it actually affects our growers. And it's actually continuing to grow. And so addressing water supply in the future, surface water treatment plants is a great way to go. You need to develop surface water treatment plants along with recharge facility, and I'm getting ready to pull this from me. So we need to do the both. Okay, thank you. I just had to correct some things. Thank you.
All right. I think the only way anyone on the panel is going to get a chance to say something if I just go to each one of you and you get your 2 minutes, then we'll go to the public. How's that? I want to hear from you because you heard a lot from citizens, I'm sure, during your 3 years.
So, 2009, I was appointed by Lee Brand. I'm just a normal citizen. I do not work for the city of Fresno. I work for a nonprofit that has nothing to do with water conservation at all. So I was appointed to represent all of you guys. And so for 3 hours a week at night, and there's several of us in this room. I see Gladys sitting in the corner and Nick's over there. We sat and we listened to all of these kinds of people. And we learned about the water situation in Fresno. And what we tried to do was to figure out what we were going to do to help our community in the future, because you've heard the problems. And so, okay, from my perspective, so what does that mean? Okay, how many times a week do I water my lawn? How many showers do my kids get? Do you refill your pool? I mean, basic stuff, right? So we're trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do about this? This is a big deal, you know, but I don't know all these terms that you're hearing here today. All I can tell you is what my water bill is, but tonight we're not talking about money or the bill. All we're talking about tonight is the problem. So I can tell you this. What I know for sure is that for years, we've had the status quo. We haven't changed the way we're doing things. And so now all of a sudden, we really have to do something different. We have to change the way we plant our yards. We have to really think about those swimming pools. We have to think about our friends in ag who need the water to grow the food that we produce in this area. And we have to really think about our priorities. So as a citizen, we represented you guys to try to come up with some things that might help. We're not talking about money tonight, so I can't talk about the rates or the things that we talked about with regard to your water rates, but I can tell you this. As a citizen group, we spent 3 years working on this, trying to come up with some solutions. And so I'm sure at a later forum you'll talk about the money, but tonight all I can tell you is this. It's a new day when it comes to your yard, your pool, how many showers your kid takes, and it's going to cost you more money if you use more water. And we've got to do something now because part of our city has water that's not that clean. You saw that, the TCBs, right? And the water down below is going down, so we've got to do something. So that's what we worked on.
So anybody else on the panel? We gave them some questions to think about before they came here, such as what problems are associated with the declining groundwater table. I think that was covered pretty well in the presentation, unless somebody has something to add to that. I'm sorry, that was Laura Whitehouse, right? We had a question about this Groundwater Sustainability Act Brock referred to. That's going to involve kind of regulatory intervention, what you're doing. So as you look across those questions panel, is there any one in particular question that you hope to say a few words about?
Good evening, Martin McIntyre. I'm with San Luis Water District. Thanks for coming out today. I just wanted to make a distinction for the city of Fresno. Indeed, up and down the valley, groundwater overdraft is a serious problem. A distinct advantage that the city of Fresno has is that it is curable. We have the resources, the water supply resources to cure it. Yeah, people have a difficult time appreciating this, but our water supply, the reservoir for our water supply is right beneath us. I mean, it's right down there. That's why recharging the groundwater is so critically important. It's not just the loss of wells and the declining water table and the greater costs of pumping it from deeper and deeper. Those groundwater contaminants are very serious, very difficult to deal with. As the groundwater level continues to decline, they become increasingly difficult to manage. There's a bowl underneath us of water, and as that bowl deepens, those groundwater contaminants move, and they move towards wells that are functioning and towards the lower hydrologic level. So very important that we cure that problem, apply the resources to get that problem cured, but the good news is we have the water supply resources to do that.
Ernie, Department of Water Resources, anything you want to add?
Sure. Ernie Taylor, DWR. I think there's been a lot of good points made already. Marty said a very good point about we do have the availability of surface supply for the city of Fresno. And that's one of the things that we can look at, the flexibility. You know, the department has encouraged local areas throughout the state to be more flexible with their water supplies, look to be more sustainable and reliable. And here Fresno has this opportunity to expand their supplies to more on the surface water side. You know, again, I think Brock talked about we use 80%, or rather groundwater is 80% of our supply. Well, anytime we can change that and rely more on surface water, that's less we have to pump. And let's look at this year. We've got a severe drought. We haven't seen this for the last 37 years, since 1977. And if we were relying on surface water more, then we would have a better situation with our condition with our groundwater. So we could use that in, if you want to call this an emergency situation, that would be probably close. So the groundwater is our backup, and the surface water could be used as our main supply.
All right, I'm going to try and get us back on time to preserve the time we'd set aside for questions and answers and comments from the public. So I know I didn't make it to all of my panel here. So I'm just going to say, is there anyone on the panel who had anything that they think hadn't been brought out so far in this discussion that's important for Fresnans to think about? I'm going to make that the last one before we start taking questions.
My name is John Sun, and I'm a professor at Fresno State. And I sometimes tend to treat everybody like a brainless student, so you have to bear with me. Now, one of the most frequent questions that people ask me is that you are a groundwater expert. How much groundwater we have in the valley? How much can we ground? You know, tell me a number. That's a very good question, but there was no definite answer for that. The reason of that is just imagine that our groundwater, as Brock showed us the diagram, is that imagine that we have a bathtub. The bathtub is completely impermeable to water. That's our bedrock. And inside the bathtub, we put a bunch of sand, dry sand. And then on the sand, I put water into the sand. And somebody come along and stick a straw into the sand and start sucking it up. So how long could it be sucked? It's definitely a limited amount. People say, well, does the earth make out of water? No way. The reason is that our groundwater resides between those little sand grains. And those we call porosity, is the space between the sand grains. Now, when you go deeper, I say, well, I don't have water, I just drill a deeper well. You know, I have money, I drill a deeper well. What do you get? Those space inside the sand grains keep decreasing until it goes to zero. And that's the end of it. And also, if you go deeper, the water quality gets worse and worse. And you have to spend more and more money on electricity. So, think about it. Our groundwater in the valley, I want to point out, is a limited resource. It's not unlimited.
Thanks. All right, so we set the table here. Hopefully, many of the things you heard were things you already know or knew, and maybe some of it was new for you. We've got about 45 minutes left. I know it's kind of difficult for you to see, particularly if you're staring at that light like I am, But we're going to start keeping track of things. If we get into something like what's the TCP source and we don't have time to deal with it tonight or the right experts to deal with it, we're going to collect these up as we go through the evening and try and weave them into the future forums where they belong. So what we'd like to do is see if anyone has other questions of the panel or from Brock about the situation, and or if you've just got your own thoughts. Maybe you see the situation here differently. If you wouldn't mind just giving us your name. Thanks.
My name's Andy Imperon.
I'm going to have a brain to you. Sorry.
Okay, basically I just want to make people aware there's also a third option, a long-term option that we need to start looking at and maybe making a plan, and that's desalinization. We have plants in Florida and Santa Barbara that can pump 150 million gallons of water in a day. So if we started pumping water in, we could also ground charge our water that way. I have more I'm going to add, but I'm going to save that for next meeting.
Okay, thanks. All right, so there's another perspective. Maybe there's another source that hasn't been thought of yet. Yes, sir.
We have Millerton Lake. Why hasn't a simple tube or straw, as the professor put it, been stuck from Millerton Lake all the way down to Fresno already? Or Friday?
Shall we see if anybody wants to tackle that one? Sure. All right, why not?
Done yet.
Yeah, all right, I think we got the question.
I'll be glad to answer. Actually, there is a straw. It's not really a straw, it's a canal that brings water down. That's the 70,000 acre feet that Fresno has access to out of Lake Millerton in most year types. The problem is we're not making effective use of that water supply.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, we're not taking the water supply and recharging it or treating it because we don't have the adequate facilities to do that. That's a big part of what this plan is about.
So that is part of the plan, is to build an infrastructure around the Millerton pipeline kind of situation, corridor,
Correct.
blah, blah, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Robert Kolstad. My question, Martin, is don't we have a significant number of ponding basins that are close proximity or adjacent to the canals running through Fresno?
There are a significant number of basins. I think Brock referred to those. Some are permeable, some percolate 3-4 feet a year, some much less than that. They're just inadequate. There are not enough of them with enough permeability to replenish the water that we're pumping out with the professor's straw.
We've started doing drilling and percolation, maybe 30 to 60 foot, 3-foot wells, right? That we then fill with gravel and force percolation. So couldn't we drill a dozen wells in each one of those? And if it's, I understand it's about 5 times the value of percolation when we have those to what standard percolation is when there are no wells, right? 0.08 to 0.38 or something like that?
Yeah, we're getting a little technical, I think, but the bottom line is those types of percolation channels are prone to plugging. They've been tried all over the Southwest, and generally they don't work unless the water's treated before it's injected.
Thanks. I know we had a couple of people with hands over here. Leah, you'd hold that for her.
I know Brock talked about the surface water treatment at Chestnut and Beheimer. I heard that there was a surface water treatment plant at Dakota and Armstrong that was built like 5 years ago. If someone can address that, how much it could treat, is that going to come online? Why we haven't been using it?
I think Brock's going to take that one.
Yeah, that's our T3 facility. And what that is it originally started out with a 3 million gallon tank. Recognizing that we were having a lot of issues with the groundwater, we modified that to include a packaged surface water treatment plant. And so that facility is capable of treating surface water. We just haven't brought that one online yet, but it's capable of treating 4 MGD to 8 MGD.
Yes, why has it been brought on?
When was it built?
It was completed last November.
I heard not 5 years ago?
No.
And can we go to this gentleman? He's had his hand up for a very long time.
Yeah, Michael here. How many acre feet of water is used in urban square mile, and how many acre feet of water is used in agricultural square mile?
Oh, somebody really wants to answer that one.
I want to answer that one because this was an epiphany for me, and I've been managing water for a long, long time. But basically, and this may be hard for you to imagine, but an urban area takes about 3 feet of water per year to serve all of our needs in the urban area. Guess what? Agriculture takes about 3 feet a year. So if you're raising trees or houses, somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 feet need to be applied. Obvious observation, we only get about 12 inches. We only get about this much in precipitation a year. So somehow we have to import that other 2 feet, or we're going to keep overdrafting the aquifer.
Thanks. That gentleman back there is next.
Yeah, Darren Holden with Nature's Water Company. We deal with residential water solutions, and we every day are walking into people who are having well issues. The issues right now are 8 to 18 months behind on well drilling, so even if we have water down there. My question for you, we're looking into other solutions too, and looking for contracts that we can help provide solutions residentially, and one of them is rainwater collection is one. And secondly, what is the percentage of runoff that the Central Valley's experience on a rainstorm that we're not able to collect because our ponding basins can only collect 1 inch of rain?
All right. So I think he's talking about various forms of recapture. Anybody want to talk about that possibility?
That's a good question, and we do recapture quite a bit of that rainwater. If you take a look at the infrastructure that was built within the city has, through the efforts of the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District, they have ponding basins on the east side to capture that water. They take it down. They're built for a 200-year storm event. They take that storm water and it goes into basins that are throughout the whole city. See, that's its purpose, to collect storm waters. And when they're not being utilized to collect storm waters, we do recharge. But we take that storm water when it's being pumped into FID facilities, and we take that and we actually take it out to facilities that FID has constructed to utilize as much of that storm water as possible. So there is a mechanism to recapture water.
You also mentioned rain barrels. Anybody looked at that as a more distributed way of attacking that, or? All right, I'm going to go to this gentleman then. Who's next?
Yeah, Bob Merrill, an emeritus professor of geology. There's an elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. The Chamber of Commerce and a group called Prosperity in Fresno and so on are pushing market forces and pushing growth in urban sprawl and development far beyond the reaches of the city. That is going to increase water demand. Nobody is talking about what that impact on sustainability, because what is sustainable in terms of if we're going to continue to have our major economic force in this valley be ag that feeds us, we've got to deal with both and also with the landscape component of urban use. But the thing is, there's a limit to growth on a finite resource. There is not infinite growth because the resource is not infinite.
All right. Does anybody want to speak to the issue of increasing demand from increasing growth and where that fits into the problem? You know what? I've got several people already in line, and they're already lined up, so I'll get to everybody, but I can't call on everybody all at once. So anybody want to tackle that one?
Yeah, Bob, this spends a lot. I think you got the point. When we have more people, we use more water. That's a fact. However, what we can also do is we want to conserve more water. We don't have to use as much. Now, in the United States, water usage is about 150 gallons per person per day. But in Fresno area, I did a back of the envelope calculation, so don't quote me about those numbers. Those are about 220 gallons a day. And in the Bay Area, In Marin County, that's 88 gallons per day per person. When I was a kid, I was not born in the United States. I was born in Hong Kong. They have a severe drought. And we survived, I survived, listen, at 2 gallons per person a day. And I'm still living.
So, conservation obviously is a part of the whole system, right? But I know some people don't want to conserve, so somebody else can move here.
So that's one of the things we really talked about as a utility committee is everyday people and what they could do to make a difference. And one thing they did, and we're not talking about rates tonight, but they really made it so that people who conserved water would pay less and those who didn't would pay more. Well, now we're getting to a point where we don't have that luxury anymore. So it's really going to be incumbent upon the regular everyday citizens to think about what they can do to conserve water.
Right. So this gentleman was next, right there.
Is there any way to measure horizontal movement of groundwater that's being percolated?
Horizontal?
I guess I'll answer that. Yeah, so we're talking about, the question is to measure, when you put ground, or when we know the vertical percolation because that's how fast, basically, we get a foot every few days out of the pond. But that's actually a really good question, is we don't necessarily know, how fast the water spreads out after it gets underground. So a lot of techniques we have is we'll put a monitoring well maybe every quarter mile away from the basin, and we can actually measure water levels, and we can calculate essentially the flux. If you look at, it's 10 feet down to water at the first well and 20 feet down to water to the next well and 30 feet down, you can actually do a calculation and figure out how fast the water is moving away. Another technique we have is we have computer models where we can, say if we, we'll put in characteristics that we know from wells in the area, and then we can try to calculate that using a computer model or something.
Oh, hi, Constance Reagan. We've only lived there about 16 years, and after seeing Brock's diagram about the amount of contamination in the water system, I was wondering, is there going to be, and we're so dependent on agriculture, but is there going to be a concerted and coordinated effort to maybe use less pesticides, maybe go more organic, and maybe our water just won't get contaminated so quickly or as much?
So Brock, you were talking mostly about what you referred to as legacy contamination, stuff that's already there that needs to be dealt with. Can you give just a real quick response about what's being done to not make the problem worse?
Well, there's actually the irrigation guys might be able to answer that better, because they're looking at nutrient loading, the applications of various pesticides to the various orchards. And that's all monitored. There's a reporting to the state that has to be done, and they're trying to optimize it, that they don't want to over-apply various materials. What we're dealing with is stuff that had been applied, soaked into the aquifer and created a situation. But perhaps one of you guys.
I think we need to understand that in terms of the farmers, it's an economic issue. It's costly to put those things out there, and it's regulated. California is the most regulated state there is in the country, okay? So if there's anything that's safe and it's not just being regulated, you got to report it, and then just the cost of putting some of those pesticides out there really drives to be more efficient.
So this gentleman over here is next. Oh, wait. This
Hi.
guy, I'm sorry, he was actually next, and then him.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Hernandez. I had a question on the new water bond that's going to be in front of the voters coming up in a few weeks. As far as this additional storage, is any of that, I know that we've kind of, I don't want to call it mismanage our water resources, but a little bit, because we haven't been able to utilize our full allocation. Is there going to be an opportunity for us to somehow bank that water as a city or not? That's the question.
Anybody want to? All right, finally get a chance to say something, Dave.
My name is Dwayne Straub. I'm with the Bureau of Reclamation, and your question is on the water bond and the storage. Bureau of Reclamation is one of the partners with the state of California on looking at storage. There's going to be a public meeting here in Fresno, I can't remember quite where it is, on the 16th of October in the evening on the Upper San Joaquin River storage investigation. Piccadilly Inn. I couldn't remember that for the life of me for some reason. But the answer is that that will all be determined because it'll have to be authorized by Congress. But right now we're looking at providing water to the Friant Water Authority and maybe possibly as far down as Los Angeles. So it'll all be decided when the legislation is written by Congress.
Gentlemen, and then
Hello, my name is Les Smith, and I just have a couple of things that I'd like to say to the people, so they'd be informed. I have three things that I'd like to just bring to light. Number one is the Helms Project, the first major release when they had water coming out of the Helms Project. It hit Friant Dam and filled halfway up to Friant Dam full of sand. They could not shut off the pumps because it would not generate electricity and power and money for whoever's running that. So the seals in the actual turbines got eaten away, and truckloads of straight PCB were infiltrated into those seals so that the turbines could keep going until they could get 3 months later the seals to go into that. PCB, it actually floats on the bottom of the river and goes all the way to the end of the Kings to wherever all these people are probably having cancer. Number two is in 1983, the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District, even though people in the area told them that they're working off 1947 Army Corps of Engineers dams, or just papers, which has no real light of what the true levels are, built the Dry Creek Reservoir. They already had the 100-year flood. The 100-year flood, the water came straight to the dam, but they wanted to prepare for the 500-year flood. They're a government agency that is actually not, they were elected by the city council. There's no government oversight. They do whatever they want, and they just want their own jobs and to just keep their own things going. They brought 30 earth movers from Alaska at night down 99 and then built a road from 99 to the Dry Creek reclamation things. They built the dam higher for absolutely no reason. Harlan, he got his little deal. He was exempted from it. Blast and Game tried to tell people that it's going to be absolutely no good, but they already had it in their plans. They had their job, so they just went ahead with it. Now, 15 years later, they're finding out that it has absolutely nothing to do with a 500-year flood, and now they're building more on the other side, Temperance and Beeheimer and all this other thing. And the third thing, which is the only thing that we may be able to do something about, is the San Joaquin River has been going full blast all summer. It has never, ever done that. The power company is making their money from there. It's going straight. It's getting shunted into the Green River. From the Green River, it's going over to the American River. From the American River, it's going through another power generation site. And from there, it's going straight into the ocean. Our farmers getting absolutely no money from it. They're getting absolutely nothing, and the reason is PG&E already has on the books, they're planning to buy up all the land that the farmers are going to lose because they don't have money so they can build solar farms. And this is all truth, and I challenge anybody to look at any of these facts and actually see who's running the people with the money. So you guys need to work with us.
Thank you. Well, does anybody have anything they would like to say in response to that? No? Okay. So this woman was next. Thank you.
Marianne Klump. I was glad to see that somebody at least as old as I am and remembers 76, 77, 78, and 79. It was worse than what we're going through now. However, Mother Nature takes care of us. So in 80, 81, 82, somewhere through there, she gave us enough water to supply the world. Did we do anything with that water? No. It ran off into wherever it ran off. Have we learned our lesson so that when it happens again, and it will, that we can take that water that she gives us and preserve it for our needs?
Okay, have we learned our lesson?
Well, let's put that in perspective. 82, 83 was a 280% hydrological year. Never experienced that before. The Tulare Lake Basin was underwater. There was water that was being flood released. Have we constructed internally local projects? Of course we have. Not only have we included some of the basins over on the east side, you have Fancher Creek Detention Basin, you have Fancher Creek Dam, you have Red Banks Dam, or Detention Basin. There's a number of things that the Flood Control District put into place to help with the flooding, but it actually captured that water, and now we're able to utilize that water, and we put some things into place. Now, the big thing is, are we going to build Temperance Flat? And that's the big question.
So we got lots of people with hands up. I just want to keep this going as fast as we can. This one right here.
Oh, hi, Nancy Waitlow. I think the people of Fresno are really getting the picture, and they really want to conserve water. And I see a lot of people taking out their lawns and putting in beautiful xeriscapes. But I also am worried about our trees. I think we really need the trees. And I just hope maybe something will be built into this new plan to save the trees, maybe the camellias too, I don't know about that. I would like the city of Fresno to consider helping residents with systems that can save and recycle the water that they use, the gray water systems. I think right now we have a free consultation service. Probably costs quite a bit of money. How about putting that into gray water system installations?
All right, thanks. Can we go right to her, and then I'm going to come over to you, and then I got somebody over there, and then you. All right.
This is kind of a follow-up on the tree question.
Okay.
I am concerned because I understand that the city's planning on prohibiting outdoor watering starting December 1st, and I believe it goes through February or March. And my concern is the street trees that are planted in a lot of the city between the sidewalk and the street. It's my understanding that the city is responsible for those trees. If they die, the city is the entity that cuts the trees down. I would sure rather have the trees preserved to help us combat, the high temperatures in the city over the summertime than have the trees die because we can't water them. Are we going to haul water out from our washing machine, rinse water to water our trees? I think the city really needs to come up with a plan on how to deal with the trees in this city and make sure they're taken care of.
All right, is there anybody here that happens to know anything about the watering of the city trees or that piece at all? We may not have the right person here. By the way, we're continuing to keep track of things that we can't address directly in this meeting to see what we can do to fit them in the next ones. No, I don't. All right, so trees are important. We got that. That particular one, apparently we don't have anyone here who can address. So this gentleman was next.
K.O. Crosby. I was wondering if it's more costly to pump water from a well or to treat surface water.
That's a really interesting question. What's more cost effective? Or is it a simple answer? Brock, you want to take that one?
It depends. As the groundwater levels have been dropping, we did some in-house calculations and found that the groundwater depths have reached such a level that now it's cheaper power-wise to run water through the plant than to lift it. So the takeaway, though, is that's also an incentive to do the recharge so that, we find a balance where we can optimize both of those operations.
That makes sense. All right. I think I had someone over here, right, Leah? Oh, thank you.
Am I on?
Yeah. You're on.
Well, why don't I hold it? All right. I'm Lauren Harding. I work closely with Doug Vagum on repealing the water rates. The city spent close to $500,000 of your dollars to keep us out of keeping this off the ballot. And finally, when they couldn't do that, they repealed the rates for 6 months. But you should all know they spent $500,000 of your dollars suing us 3 times to try to stop us. And finally, they caved. The city, and the same thing happened in Davis, and they caved there too. In fact, they gave up completely on big water rates. We don't need the that southeast surface water treatment plant, 274 million with its pipes. We don't need that. Here's what I say, and me and Doug, 30 million gallon a day to 60 million in the northeast plant. That would cost a lot. They would cost less than 100 million, so double the northeast plant. Cut use from 140,000 acre feet a year to maybe 120,000. Plant drought-tolerant plants, cut watering from 22 hours a week now to 6 hours a week. Jay Lund, UC professor, says half of urban water use is landscaping. You're watering your lawns. That's where it's going here. Recycle 25,000 acre feet. Build all those ponding basins. We need that. We're not using the water we have available. 2 weeks ago, the governor signed bills to force ag and other cities like Fresno and to cooperate on a water budget. It won't kick in really till 2020 and 2025, but he signed that 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I believe. 80% of groundwater use in California is ag use. So this will force ag to own up to how much they're pumping. They're not required to meter their wells now. They will with this. And then we can all get together and develop a water budget. So it makes no sense to abandon the aquifer under Fresno. That's the plan here. We're going to abandon the aquifer, go to an expensive surface water treatment system, and gouge you with outrageous water rates, and you should not put up with it. Do the water main replacement. We want that. Certain members of the Utility Advisory Committee told the council in 2011 that, gee, what's the matter with us not wanting that? We say replace the aging water mains. Now, this is a final important point. Instead of all these rate hikes, you can do a property tax assessment. Doug Vagum knows all about that. He says it can be done. You put it on your property tax. You'd pay a lot less every year than you would with these big water rate hikes. And that takes a two-thirds vote of the voters to do that. We would support it. We'd work for it. And with that, your water bill would go down every year. Your property tax would decline as those bonds are paid off. With a big rate hike, you just pay more forever. After they build their expensive plant, the money keeps rolling in. So you do it as a property tax assessment. So we don't need this gouging. Noah Diffenbaugh at Stanford says we'll lose the snowpack. It's going to start falling as rain instead of snow. So that's something we should think about. How much water is under Fresno? How much is under the Central Valley? Well, 90 million acre feet is under the Kings River Conservation District. 90 million acre feet. Shasta has 4 million acre feet. So we have an enormous pool of water under here. This cry that the sky is falling, we're running out of water, no, not at all. USGS hydrologist Michelle Sneed says we don't know how much water is under that aquifer. We can't drill to the bottom of it. So those are some thoughts. Don't put up with the rate gouging. Go to an assessment. Do the things we've suggested. What this really, their plan is a pro-growth plan. Let's add 500,000 people to Fresno. That's really why they need all this more water, and that's just outrageous. No community should be doubling their population when you look at climate change, global warming, and sea level rise. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. You're going to want to come back to the next forum and the next one, because next one we'll be talking about what do you need to address this. You've got some very strong ideas. And then the third forum will be how should we pay for it, which you also brought up. But I'm not going to ask any of my people here to respond to that, because then we'll just go off on the second, third forum. And I'm still trying to get to some people who've had their hands up for a very long time. Who did I say was next? Here? Well, I don't know if you were next. You don't always. I think she actually was. Go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank all of you for putting this on for us and giving us an opportunity to speak. I'm Martha Kolstad, and I've been at a few of the meetings of late, knowing that these kinds of things are being available to us, and have seen some of you at these meetings. My question is, as we're all trying to be good stewards of our environment and knowing how serious this is, we are doing our part. We have been, our plants are dying and so on. But what about forest fires? What about the fact that we have really, really thick forests that should be trimmed so that the water can penetrate the ground and provide new growth and so on? I understand, I think at a meeting I've been attended, that the water after a fire not only is destroying wildlife, it's destroying the birds, it's destroying the fauna. You know, the land is, is it destructed for, for 15 or 20 years, and then the runoff is dirty, and talk about pesticides and so on. We have dirty water as a result of that as well. Why are we not trimming our forest and letting our forest firefighters go in and not putting their lives in danger so that they can actually get in the roads, put the fires out? I mean, there's a lot of water that we're using for stuff like that. That seems very practical.
Okay.
Why are we not doing that?
So is there anybody here who wants to talk to, the wildfire situation? Here you go, Ernie.
I don't know too much about the wildfire situation, but, the Department of Water Resources has been looking and doing a study on thinning the forest, reducing some of the fire fuel in the forest, and what would that mean to our water resources? Would it increase our runoff, and by how much? And we've done some studies up in the Kings River area. There's that one in the Kings, and then there's also one further north, and that's what we're finding. We're finding that there is some benefits. One, of course, reduces some of the fires or the impacts from those fires, and then two, we do see some not groundwater, but we see some benefits to our water supplies. So we are doing those studies. We do have a lot more work to do on changing how we manage our forests. We have new forest management plans, but we need to do some more work on those. Well, in the old days, we had natural fires. We didn't have so many people living up in the hills. We didn't have to work at it. Now we do.
I think you identified somebody for me over here, Leah, that was next. Maybe a couple of people. You can go over here to this side.
Hi, I'm John Tracy. I did my homework before I came here. I went back and looked at the previous 12 months of my water bill and the amount of gallons that I use. Now, I have a house with under 1,900 square feet on an 8,000 square foot lot, no swimming pool, and my consumption was 185,000 gallons in 1 year. Now here's the paradox. I drive around town and I see these homes being built, tracts of 100, 200 homes. Now we have a finite amount of water, we all know that. The paradox I see is, why are we allowing homes being built during this drought period where each home, perhaps on an average, will consume 185,000 gallons. 185,000 gallons that we don't have to spare. If we want to get serious, let's put a moratorium on building residential homes until we're out of this mess.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you get a chance to say anything yet? Okay, let's get somebody new back there.
I'd like to ask the Bureau of Rec man if, pardon me, if Proposition 1 goes through and Congress authorizes Temperance Flat, how many years will it take to get that thing built, and how much new water will come out of that project?
Tough questions. Construction by itself, once it starts, and assuming that no one sues to stop the construction, will take approximately 4 years. But those are big assumptions because you have to get through the permitting process, through the environmental review, and through what could possibly be litigation. So construction itself is about four years. The amount of water, the amount of new water is less than what you would think or what might imagine, because there's already reservoirs that are built, and it depends on how big the reservoir is, what Congress authorizes. But I think that the estimates, and I'm not quite sure, but if you look online, there's information. But we can find that out for you before the next meeting.
As a backup to that, I had something to do with New Melones when I worked for the Corps, which is a 44 flood control project that got finished out in the 70s. So to say 4 years is pretty misleading, and that had 7 classifications of water use. So just in terms of trying to set this in context, if you could be, you guys must have more realistic estimates to finish construction and authorization. So what would be a kind of a reasonable time to get that thing online?
He's asking you to speculate, Dwayne.
More than 10 years.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So, that's my mic. So I've seen some people put their hands up for the second time, but I really want to get to some people for the first, if at all possible. Yes.
Hi, I'm Beth Wyman from CSU Fresno, Earth and Environmental Science, and I see some colleagues here, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about where the injection will be, and if you inject the water, how that site's chosen, and then what the hydraulic gradient might be when you start the injection.
Okay. Who wants to take that one? No. Did you address that to anyone in particular?
So I don't know if Barack knows when you start injecting what the water table will look like? Or
One of the scenarios that was discussed was doing these boreholes in existing basins. We've had some limited experience with that. Our Leaky Acres facility, the basins on the north side of Ashland, typically have percolated about 800ths a foot a day. It's very poor. To try and enhance that, we went out and we drilled the 24-inch boreholes 60 feet deep to see if we could improve that, and we did. It went up to 2400ths. So it's kind of a marginal payback. What we did this year, on top of that, there's a lot of hard pan in those basins, and we went in there with a big cat and some deep shanks, and we tore up the hard pan, and with that we actually got percolation rates up to 3400ths. So we're finding through active maintenance and cleaning of the basins that optimizes things. One of the other things for injection is something that's been touched on, but it's very expensive, and that's ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery. It's where you have surface water treatment plants, they produce so much water, but your demands vary throughout the year. So in the winter you have low demands, in the summer they increase, and then they taper off again. And in those shoulder months, your plant could be running still and you could do injection, but the construction of those wells is very expensive, and right now just the active recharge that we're doing is more cost effective.
Got a couple of ones that haven't gone yet. This gentleman here.
Oh, you don't. Okay. Yeah, Jerry Bill, resident of Fresno for 44 years. I have a technical question about recharge. I just want to know what the efficiency is in these ponding basins. Like if you put 1,000 acre feet into a ponding basin, how much of that actually gets into the aquifer and how much is lost to evaporation and other losses?
Those numbers vary dramatically because we're talking about natural percolation, and as Brock was suggesting, depends on the subsurface materials, not just near surface, but at depth as well. Basins will percolate from less than 1/10 of a foot a day. Some basins will be half a foot. There's even basins that'll do close to a foot a day. In an average year in Fresno, you lose about 4 feet of water to evaporation. So if you kept the basin full all year round, you'd lose about 4 feet of evaporation versus, say, half a foot a day to 1/4 of a foot a day on average percolation. And since I have the bully pulpit, I just want to correct something that the gentleman here said. agriculture does not use 80% of the water supply of the state. If you're talking about the developed water, about 40% goes to environmental purposes, dedicated to environmental purposes, about 40% to ag, and roughly 20% to urban and industrial uses.
So we are rapidly running out of time, and I'm still trying to get to everybody for their first chance, and I don't know that we're going to make it. I do know that gentleman has had his hand up for a while, so Shauna, if you could get over there as this gentleman goes here.
Mark writes, now that the city's completed their residential water meters, is enough data available to see how much the city's been able to save in water on a yearly basis?
Yeah, Brock, you mentioned that in your presentation. I don't know if you quantified it, though.
Looking at our usage in 2008, we were at 165,000 acre feet. As the implementation of the project moved forward, it was 5 years of construction, we saw reductions of 10,000 acre feet in the first 2 years. And then that started to harden. We got 7,000 and then 1,000. But over that 5-year period, I may not be getting all these numbers right, we saved as much as 29,000 acre feet with the implementation of meters.
Who was next? This gentleman back here. Yeah, he's been waiting a while.
Hi, Tim Barker, Fresno resident. I went around through the different displays, saw a few flaws here and there. I thank everyone for their time and their friendliness. Recharging the aquifers using ponding. How's the water kept in the aquifer and not being pumped out in unincorporated areas and farm areas? Also, let me see, we do have the state water bond coming up. It's favorable at this point, so presumably whatever they decide to do will pass. But as I understand, the best that I can understand at this point, at $2.7 billion, $700 million is allocated for cities to reuse their bath water, and the rest of it goes to farms. And so I think that, however, the farms use, according to Fresno Bee, farms use 5/6 of the water in Fresno County, but I guarantee that the residents will be paying 95% of that water bill. Also, what we haven't discussed, and I think it's an issue of leadership, because we should not have been in this problem of having being out of water and crying alarm here, is that in the terms of planning and being proactive, why are we not addressing riparian rights in the new proposed dams also? Because at this point, as I understand it, as I already mentioned, I don't think the city gets any fresh water, even though in the, some of the political ads you see on TV, they're promoting the dam as being a freshwater source for families.
Right. So that was like 5 questions, I think. It could take a while, and I think we lose the cameras at 8:30. So I wanted to make sure that, Doug, you had a chance to say something before we got there, so you want to?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Doug Vega, one of the signatories to the agreement that brought us all together. And thank you, City. I didn't have anything to do with this, but I'm glad you did it. Your cookie budget was bigger than what we spent on putting the petition together, so when you have the resources, you can do a lot of magic things here. The folks here tonight are doing the moderating, and I'm glad the city had the budget to pay for that. And we have a direction here. It looks like the city is draping out everything that they did last year. That isn't the issue here, folks. The issue is, how much are you going to cost the consumer to solve your problems? A new day when the governor signed the budget. It's good to see these gentlemen here, these experts. I've had an opportunity to visit with some of them. Mr. McIntyre and I go way back. We tussled over the water meter issue. They told us then it was going to cost $35 million. It's going to end up costing us $250 million when you add the interest. We can miss these marks, folks. Don't kid yourself. That plant's been up and running, attempted. You don't have the PG&E to run T3 for more than since last November. Look, we're not going to solve the problems, and I love these public discussions. I'm hoping Mr. Escueda gets these folks together and we solve a problem. When the governor signed that bill, it's a new day. We got to do this conjunctively. It's a conjunctive, FID. The folks from Met Flood wasn't up there, but they had 30,000 acre feet from their rainwater every year, but they weren't up there in the inventory. This city refuses to do a water budget. We refuse to do a water budget. You know why? Because it would stop perhaps somebody from growing more houses. To your question. We need to solve this problem. No doubt about it. We come full circle. Mr. Rudd's here, the city manager, his former predecessor, Mr. Souza, in 2005 put a memo out. It's still up on the city website. They'll probably scrub it now. But he was telling us that our sprinkler systems in 2005 should run 60 minutes a week to adequately water our lawns, okay? Now that is probably a true statement, but 2005 was a big water year. And the 3 water years that we've had, the city of Fresno would not be able to run those water plants that they have proposed today and last year. They couldn't run them. They would be sitting idle. It'd be like building a freeway and not allowing cars on it. Is that a waste of taxpayers' dollars? We need to do this balanced. We need to do it conjunctively. FID, Met Flood, all these other gentlemen from all these other irrigation districts and government agencies need to come together, and we can solve this together. So I appreciate you doing this, and thank you, and the other forums will be interesting too. Thank you, and have the cookie budget. Thank you.
Thanks. So we were supposed to end at 8:30, but I think the only thing that has to end at 8:30 is the cameras are going to be turned off. So, but we can go longer, and we still got people who want to talk. The gentleman posed, I think, like 4 or 5 questions. So if you remember what they were, any of them were, and you had something you wanted to say in response, I'd like to panel. Anything in particular that you want? Ernie, do you have something on your mind? No, he's good. Nope, they're all good. Oh, Brock, here you go.
I think a lot of what was being shared was, about, well, are you talking about the gentleman in the orange shirt? Well, I was going to respond to the gentleman that had the flood control projects and whatnot. Those are not our facilities. Flood control has the plan and is charged with going out and protecting the city from these flood events that, historically went and flooded the downtown area. So, they did a great job in building those facilities and protecting the city.
Hi, my name is Marina Magdaleno, and I think this is a wonderful venue here tonight, bringing people together and having these discussions. But one of the things that I'm very disappointed in, and I talked to Tommy today and to Bruce, is that I think that each one of these forums should be repeated in each of the areas. So not just today here at Hoover, but the second one and the third one should come back to Hoover, because there's a lot of people here. But our city is 500,000, and this doesn't probably even constitute a fraction of the people that live in this district. And in order for, there's a lady here next to me who said she's probably not going to go out to the site on Church Avenue because she doesn't know where it's at, and it's not in an area of town that she maybe really wants to go to. So I think that if we're going to do this, if the city is really wanting to engage the community, I think that the community as a whole needs to be engaged, and the community should have each of these presentations at each of the sites so that everyone that is here tonight can come back and listen to number 2 and listen to number 3 and so forth and so on. And every one of those sites should have each of these presentations also afforded to them. I think by doing it the way they're doing it, you are not engaging the whole community, and it's about being transparent with the residents of this city. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. My panel said they can stay a few minutes longer. I still want to get some first chances for some people who never did. This guy's had his hand up for a while. Can we go over here, please?
My name's Jim Thale. I have a question. Is there any regulatory instrument that regulates new growth of homes, et cetera, based on these things we're talking about, water availability?
Anybody? I seem to recall a law that you had to have water before you could build or something like that.
Well, there is a statute that bears directly on that. every community has to do a water supply assessment that demonstrates a minimum of 20 years worth of water supply prior to approval of the development.
So I see some eager hands from people who want a second chance, but I still got more people who haven't had their first.
Hi, I'm Sandy Brock. I do work for the city, but I'm here on my own time, and I'm here out of respect for the engineers and the staff at the Water Division, who are some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. And for 30 years, I've worked at the city for 26, and I was a health inspector before that. I've kept my health inspector license. I'd like to address the issue of drilling percolation wells. You can use those in a basin like Leaky Acres, where we're taking deliveries of clean surface water from the canals that comes down out of the mountains, but you have to be very careful and probably not do that in ponding basins, which may receive rather contaminated water runoff from properties and streets. Remember that all the lawn fertilizer and animal waste and everything else that winds up on your lawn and driveway ends up in those ponding basins, despite our best efforts to keep that drainage water clean. So you would not want to inject that very deep in the aquifer. That soil percolation is a buffer that helps it keep it clean. Secondly, the issue of people wanting their own gray water and cisterns. The state has a rather Rube Goldberg requirement for building a gray water system, and that's because rainwater from your roof is also pretty dirty, and it tends to attract vermin like mice. In the old days, when people supplied their homes with cisterns from rainwater, they frequently caught typhoid, and the family would have a lot of deaths because mice are full of salmonella germs in their gut, and rodents and everything are attracted to stored rainwater. Even today, there's a new law passed a couple of years ago that if you're going to have rain barrels, you need a fine mesh screen, which of course can clog, because of the new species of mosquitoes coming into the area. And the stuff you've been hearing in the news about Aedes mosquitoes and the risk of dengue fever, chikungunya, and other Aedes-borne diseases is very real, and the Mosquito Control District has advised us to be careful about advising people about collecting rainwater. Thank you.
I think we should end on that optimistic note. What do you think? You know, why not? No, actually, we do have one more person, and then I see a lot of people packing up like they want to leave. I'm so sorry, but we're starting to lose people. It's getting kind of disrespectful
I'm
to everyone else.
Charlene
Go ahead.
And a resident for 40 years here in the Valley in Fresno. And I had a question at the last meeting that we had, and I was told they would research. But on a conservation level, if all the restaurants in the state of California only served water when people asked for it, that could be like a huge savings. And I don't know if there's any kind of requirement, if that's open. And I was never answered that.
Right. I don't know what meeting that was at, but does anybody have a quick response to conservation through reduced water use at restaurants? Anything they want to? I mean, why don't we talk to Brock afterwards and see if he can? All right, I got 3 people who have had their hands up for super long time that want second helpings. And they've been so assiduous about it. I'm going to take you and you and you, and then we're going to stop. How's that sound?
My question is this: have the city leaders reached out to our congressional representation and asked them and explained to them the situations going on and say, we need more money for our infrastructure repairs? Has anybody talked to the congressmen?
Yeah, so rather than, and we're going to get into this, I think, in form number 3, but it's like rates, parcel taxes, but what about other people? OPM, we call it other people's money. Of course, it's still our money because we're still a taxpayer, but anyway. But what about federal, other? Does anyone want to tackle that, or do we want to well, you're from the state.
So, one of our programs is called the Integrated Regional Water Management Program, and we do have funds. This was out of Prop 84, so it's a number of years ago, and we have one last funding cycle that in some respects can pay for some of this infrastructure. You have to go through a ranking and priority process with your local IRWM group. So you have to have a good project, and it has to meet some of their criteria. So it depends.
So we're gonna have to save that one, I think, for the third forum. We're talking about paying for it. This one right here.
One more question. I'm not into this new math today. I understand we have a population of 700,000 people, and I would debate that. I think it's more like 1 million. Why do we only have 135,000 meters? Now, that does not calculate.
Population's about 510,000 people. The city. The city, not the county. That's just the city. And then our residential accounts, there's typically 3 people per household, the 3.2. So that's 110,000 residential meters, and then there's about 35,000 commercial meters.
Generally, apartment complexes have a single meter, so if you've got 20 apartment units, you have 1 meter.
Sure, right here.
I had the opportunity of listening to a presentation of the general plan for the city of Fresno, and I think they had 8 or 10 areas that they were concerned in rewriting it, but there was no mention of water in their general plan.
All right. Could you make sure you get that comment, Karen? Sorry, she's been occupied here about no mention of water in the general plan, something we need to think about. And I know I said I was going to take this through, but this guy looks so sincere. This is going to be our last one, okay?
First of all, I would really like to thank all the water professionals that are here. You've dedicated your life to solving things like this for us. I know it might not be practical for parts of the city that have already been built up, but for newer construction, would it be feasible to maybe have a non-potable type of water for landscaping, so that maybe some of that surface water, without dropping it down into deep wells, we could actually water the lawns and let it soak in? Would that be unreasonable?
Yeah, so what would using non-potable or non-drinkable water do for this situation?
Well, we heard some great comments about gray water use and some of the issues there, but what we started to do, and in 2025, we're looking at developing recycled water as part of our supply portfolio. And actually, our wastewater division has finished the design for a 5 million gallon per day facility to treat water to potable use or levels. We're not going to use it for that. And then circulating it through the city for irrigating turf areas and landscape and other uses like that. So it is something we're exploring and developing right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much for coming tonight. We really appreciate your participation. There's 3 more of these to come, and we're going to take all of these notes of things that didn't maybe fit in tonight and do our best to fit them into future forums. Thank you for doing that. And if there's any cookies left, pick them up. All right. Thank you.